So, good evening. This webinar is called Crafting a College List. I'm Dr. P, and I created this webinar for high school students of all ages and their parents. So, I am the founder and head coach at Crimson Coaching, which provides academic tutoring, test prep, and college consulting services of various types to mainly high schoolers. I have some middle school students around the world. We provide sort of we do crafting college lists for students and their families privately. So that's kind of what this is based on. And we also do things like coaching for extracurricular projects, sort of impact projects that students may want in order to really have something great to write about on their college essay, as well as helping them write the college essay themselves. And a lot of times students ask, well, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? And that is because crimson is the color or sort of of my alma mater, Harvard. And so therefore I named it Crimson Coaching. And I do see myself more as a coach, which, is sort of the intersection rather of teacher and cheerleader. I think that's best what describes what I do in the tutoring, test prep, as well as college consulting that I do. And I developed this talk because I just noticed that so many of the families that I was working with, mainly on the college essay side, were really flummoxed and overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices that they could choose from for when they go to craft a college list. And while, of course, in a 1-hour talk, I can't do everything that I do over, weeks with families privately, I thought I would kind of give you the highlights so that you could do this yourself. So tonight's agenda will be pretty similar. If a bunch of you have gone to other talks that I've given on other topics, I will talk for about 30, 40 minutes, depending on how things go. And during that time, if you could keep yourself muted, and then once the prepared remarks are over, feel free to open yourself up. There's only 8 of us on the call, so there's not that many of us. You can feel free to unmute yourself, or I'll take questions in the chat. But before we go any further, I do just want to give 3 big thank yous. First, to the Japan Public Library for sponsoring the talk. They had me as a guest a while ago in the winter, and I'm so pleased that they brought me back. And to Laura Cohen for organizing the talk and organizing the Zoom and all the details with registration. And finally, to all of you, whether you're a student and have been in online school perhaps, or a parent and maybe you've been online working all day, I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to sit through yet another Zoom meeting. So thanks. So before we go any further, I do just want to kind of share my sources with you, where the information that I got the content of this talk from. And, full disclosure, this is actually the place where I lived as an upperclassman at Harvard. It's called Dunster House. A couple of years ago, I went back to my 25th class reunion at Harvard and was fortunate enough to sit in on a talk given by the head of admissions there, William Fitzsimmons. And so some of the things that he said in his prepared remarks actually come from that talk. But I would say by far, the largest part of this talk comes from just my 7 years of professional experience guiding guiding students and their families through the college application journey. So I might talk about different students here, of course, all anonymously, and that comes from my work there. And then recently, this last year, Jeffrey Salingo published Who Gets In and Why, a year inside college admissions. And actually this year, another New York Times journalist named Ron Lieber published The Price You Pay for College. And some of my information comes from those two books as well. And when it does, I will cite those authors. Okay. So for Anissa, as well as the mom of the 8th grader in there, I am so pleased that you showed up to this talk as 8th and 9th graders, because my best advice is to start the college search early. You want to also stay broad in terms of what colleges you're looking at, but I would say to save families some money, you want to visit local. So what does that actually mean? Well, I say visit, and by that I mean online visit. You can definitely do that. Or visit within an hour's drive. And we are so lucky in our neck of the woods that within an hour or two drive, we have rural, suburban, and urban schools. We have large and small schools, and we have public and private schools. And if you match those all up, you've got rural public, rural private, rural large, rural small, and all the different permutations thereof. If you think about visiting just those in 9th and 10th grade, by the end of 9th and 10th grade, you're going to have a really great idea of what kind of school you would want to go to. You may know, what, urban school, small school, public school is not for me. I want to go to a suburban private school that's really large, whatever it is. So then when you then begin to pay real money to go and travel to schools that are actually on your list, potentially out of state, you're not going to be kind of looking at a huge variety of schools. So for example, if you have both UCLA in California and maybe Reed College in Oregon, which are very different kinds of schools on your list, and you're going to see them both, I would say really sort of, why are you doing that? You haven't really given thought to the kind of school you would be most happy at. Okay, so this is the time to do that. I also would take copious notes and many pictures. Oftentimes the pictures, they say pictures worth 1,000 words, and that is definitely true for the college visits, because you won't be, if you visit in 9th grade, you may not apply to that school until 3 years later, if you wind up going to a school that's very close to you. Okay. It is also true that you may not be applying to those schools that you're visiting locally in the 9th and 10th grade, but still, recording your impressions is very important, so you don't forget the things that you were impressed by. And if you feel like you need a chart for that, feel free to email me. I have a Google Doc that you can copy, and you can kind of keep it in perpetuity. The other thing, whether you're visiting online or whether you're visiting in person, you need to remember to pace yourself. I would not try to go to more than one school a day or visit more than one school a day. I know that when you travel out of state, this can become not super cost effective if you are only seeing one a day. So you might have to see 2 a day. I get that. I would definitely not see more than 2 a day, because even 2 a day, you really run the risk of all of the details muddling all together. And so if you have to see more than 1 a day, that's even more important why you need to take lots of notes and pictures. And finally, if you're on campus and, increasingly now that more people are getting vaccinated and more students are going back to online, to in-person learning, increasingly more schools are offering in-person tours. You still might not be able to go inside buildings or, see dorm rooms, see where students eat. You might not be able to see classes, but, many schools you'll be able to at least visit the campus from the outside. Beware of what Jeff Salingo calls the $1 million march, which is really where the tour guides really take you to the best parts of the campus and only the best parts of the campus. Ron Lieber also, and you know what? Since I didn't have a shot of Ron Lieber's book, I'm actually going to put that book into the chat for everybody so that you can see what I'm talking about. He is a personal finance columnist for the New York Times, and his book is called The Price You Pay for College. And in his book, he points out that some of these tour guides now are paid. They used to be, back in the day, they used to be all volunteer. And so you could really get kind of a better sort of unfiltered, unvarnished view of that student's experience in college. Now that might be less the case. And so, if there's a way, if you could find out whether that student is being paid to do the talk, then they most likely have been given sort of the company line of what only the college wants you to know about. And as an aside, Ron Lieber in his book advises that, especially if the tour guide is unpaid, ask them, who are your 3 closest friends? Was it easy to meet them here? So that you can get an idea about what it's like to be a student at that school. I think that's really important for just students' emotional well-being when they go away to college. Oop. So 9th and 10th graders, the most important thing that you should remember while you're going through this process is that nothing is more important in the application that you will eventually submit in 12th grade than your grades and how hard your coursework is. So, there's a high school opens up a whole bunch of extracurriculars and social activities for you. But it's very important that you sort of keep your eyes on the prize. And the most important factor that will get you into college is your grades and how difficult the courses that you take are. And so you really want to keep that in mind as you're going through college, because, there's 2 parts to crafting a college list. One is what we what we just talked about, sort of your search of the colleges. The other part is what you're bringing to the college. And that is kind of at the top of the list. The SAT and ACT get a lot of hype, but they're not as important as the grades and the rigor of your coursework. Something you might also want to do, even though, again, extracurriculars are not as important as grades and coursework, they are still an important component of the college application, especially if you're not going to submit test scores. So it's much easier to remember what you did in 9th grade if you write those things down. No, I'm not saying you need to write every single day, I did 27 minutes of yearbook today. No, but I might say, at the end of every week, you might, just kind of look back and say, hey, how many hours did I do soccer practice? How many hours did I rehearse for the play? And kind of keep track of that, because believe it or not, in your Common App that you submit to most likely all colleges or other versions of these online application portals, you're going to need to provide precisely that data. And remembering as a 12th grader what you did back in 9th grade is most likely going to be very difficult. Okay, so I would say keep that journal. 10th grade. This brings in parents, and I'm really glad that there are a lot of parents in the audience tonight, because, you know, the subtitle of Ron Lieber's book, I believe, is something like A Guide to the Most Important Financial Decision Your Family Will Ever Make. And it is that. I mean, especially if you've got more than one child, right? If you think that, 4 years at a private college could be about $250,000 for one student, and so $500,000 for two. That's the price of a house, right? And so, you really want to, I think it's only fair that parents share, first of all, that parents share with students how much money they're actually willing and able to give to their child for college. And that amount should also dictate what types of schools appear on the college list. And Jeffrey Salingo, in his book, Who Gets In and Why, categorizes colleges into buyers and sellers. And buyers are, in a very crass way of describing it, schools that are perhaps not as prestigious as the Ivy League, as the small liberal arts colleges, and so need to attract high-level quality students by offering them what they call merit aid or scholarships, but that in effect act as discounts. On the other hand, sellers are those Ivy League schools, the MITs, Stanfords, the sort of top tier small liberal arts schools that are so competitive to get into, and so many students want to go there that they don't need to offer quote unquote discounts to attract students. They do, however, on the other hand, often have very robust need-based aid. So that's based, solely on your FAFSA or the federal aid student form that you will fill out usually in the fall of your child's application year, and that tells colleges how much money based on your income your child can expect to pay for college, the EFC, the expected family contribution, and how much you're going to need from other sources. Okay, so Salingo writes that if your family can't easily write a $21,000 check for the average in-state public college, or $49,000 for the average private school, and do that for 4 years, be sure to have a few buyers on your list where your chances for merit aid are better. So again, you want to have those buyers, especially if your family is most likely not going to get a ton of need-based aid because your or your spouse's income is so high. Okay, so if you're not sure which schools are buyers and which schools are sellers, of course, who would know that? You can go to jeffsalingo.com's website and find that, and he has an entire list. I don't think it's exhaustive, but there are quite a few colleges on there. Basically, he and I also suggest that you really look beyond the quote unquote brand name schools and beyond the schools where others in your high school have attended. When you get closer to, Michelle Breen on the talk mentioned that her son's an 11th grader. By this time in the 11th grade, you probably have heard of the software called Naviance or similar type software that your child's guidance counselor uses to basically, they kind of enter in your child's GPA, your child's SAT or ACT scores, and out gets spit a bunch of schools that students from that high school in previous years have attended who have a similar profile to your child. However, in his book, Salingo describes how, generally Naviance is sending all the kids in that school to about the same 20 schools over and over and over again. And so if the other kids in your high school are applying to those same 20 schools, well, it's going to be more competitive for you to get into. So look beyond the brand names, beyond where Naviance is kind of spitting out where you should go in order to have a greater chance at some of that. Sorry, it was your daughter, not your son. I'm sorry. I apologize for that error, Michelle. But look beyond where others have gone in your high school. That's really the moral of the story here. So, letting your academic interest guide your college list might seem like duh, but I have to tell you, working privately with students, I have heard some really interesting, unique. I never thought that, the architecture of a school or the aesthetics of a school would place so much importance in the why certain students wanted to go to a certain school rather than another school. Look, I was an art history major. I know aesthetics are really important, but I would say that might not be the most important thing that should dictate where you're applying to college. Most likely, what you might like to major in should be a really important point or characteristic that is on your list. And when you think about how you want to learn that subject in the right way for you, so think about, do I mainly want to be in a huge lecture course or a class with maybe 300 kids, or do I really feel more comfortable with 20 other students in the class? And these characteristics of a college are sometimes, as Lieber points out in his book, are really difficult to get at. And so when you go on tours, you really want to ask not just what the average class size is, but also the time that students will spend in the different class sizes. So if you're going to spend 80% of your time in classes that are more than 100 students, let's say, and you're an introvert and feel like you can't learn with that many other students, that's going to be really important for you to figure out. The so-called teacher-student or professor-student ratio can also be really misleading, because in many Research One universities, many professors, they're full professors, but they may not teach. They may just be researchers. They also may teach only graduate students. You also want to know, are graduate students doing a lot of the teaching? Now, I was a graduate student who once taught at Rutgers University, where I got my Ph.D. So I don't want to bash graduate students, but clearly, I don't think I was as qualified to teach undergraduates, hardly being much beyond that myself as I would be right now. Okay, so there are really lots of important questions, not just about price, that you can find in Ron Lieber's book. Another really important characteristic of a college you might want to consider is, what are the opportunities for research and internship, especially if your reason for going to college is getting a good job after graduation, right? Lieber outlines there are three main reasons why people go to college. One is to have their mind blown. Two is to find members of their tribe, people who become friends for life, maybe a mate for life, right? And then the other is for vocational or professional opportunities afterwards. None of these is quote unquote right or wrong, but you also want to drill down on what's the important reason why you're going to college, and figure out. So if work and a great job afterwards is really important, then programs that can set you up for that are going to be also really important. So I want to just say there's going to be a bunch of websites coming up, and I'm going to go through this really quickly. You do not have to worry about getting them all down. I have a little handout that I'm happy to share with you if you email me, and you'll get my email in the chat later and on the slide later. So you can just sit back and relax and take this all in, okay? So tuitionfit.org has where you can discover the true pricing of colleges. And you would think that this information would be easy to find out, but it's actually very difficult to find out. And so this website is a place where you could find that. Admit.me, you can learn about saving and paying for college. The collegescorecard.ed.gov is a treasure trove of information where you can research majors and careers, compare colleges based on their costs, based on their graduation rates, how many students are defaulting on their loans, which, by the way, people are defaulting on their loans if they can't get a good job, usually after college. So the more loans that are being defaulted on is a function of that. Also, it's also a function of how much money did they have to take out in the first place to go to that college, okay? You can find out the average loans as well as people's post-grad employment. And the other one is a College Navigator, and you can find out similar information there. Again, feel free to email me for a list with all of these websites on there. So those are everything that we just talked about are things that I advise looking at during 9th and 10th grade. Okay. If you are not able,
Can you warm the soup?
I'm going to ask whoever just joined to please mute themselves. Hang on just a second. I am going to mute you. Sorry, Daniel. Okay, there we go. So sorry about, gosh. Okay, I can't get out of this now. Hang on one moment. Okay. So see what happens. I get super distracted. So that's why I asked everybody to keep themselves muted. So everything that we just talked about are things that I suggest doing in 9th and 10th grade. But if you're the parent of an 11th grader, don't fear. You can still do all of that stuff right now. You just might have to do it more frequently than you would have had to had you started 2 years ago. But it can still be done. It's not too late. Okay. So once you figured out, where your child wants to go to school in terms of Northeast, South, or West, Midwest, as well as whether they want to go urban, rural, suburban, and what size, I suggest compiling a list of about 7 quote unquote reach schools, 15 target schools, and 10 safety schools. And within them, again, if price is an issue, you want to make some of them buyers and you can make some of them sellers. Okay. How do I figure out what's a safety reach or target for me, you ask? Well, good question. There is no science to that determination. It is very much an art. But this is first what I do. If your child has taken an ACT or SAT, and if they've only taken a PSAT or PACT, add about 100 points to that, so you have kind of a baseline, right? I generally believe that if your child's score is in the mid 50%, that is a target school, okay? If your child's score is in the top, is above the median in the top quartile, that's probably a safety. And if your child is in the bottom quartile, it's probably a reach. Okay. Now, a lot of people say, well, what if I'm not submitting scores? Well, then you want to do that same thing in terms of GPA. Although I will say that GPA is a little bit more difficult of a barometer because some schools don't participate on the 4.0 scale, and it's unweighted and weighted, and it's certainly an imprecise science at best. Okay. And the other metric that you should definitely use is that school's acceptance rate. I don't know whether you've heard, because you may not have a senior in high school, and you may not have, and your child may not have any friends who are seniors in high school, but college applications jumped dramatically this year, pretty much across the board. And there's two factors for that. One is most colleges went test optional because of COVID, right? Their students were unable to take an SAT or ACT, and so colleges, of course, had no choice but to say, well, it's not required that you do that. I actually also believe that many colleges, that many applications went up because of the online learning situation. And I can tell you just sort of anecdotally that this then made many colleges more competitive than they ever had been. So, for example, I was working with a student in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who actually she didn't even tell me that she was applying to the local state college, University of Minnesota Twin Cities, because she had kind of been so sure that she would get in. She had an ACT of 30. Her GPA was 3.0, so a little bit on the low side, but the acceptance rate was 56%. And so, it seemed like a pretty good bet. However, in past years, they, in all years, I should say, they have space for 3,000 students in their class. And so at 50 of acceptance rate of 56%, that means they usually got a little bit of around 6,000 students, right, applying. This year, they got 30,000 students applying to that school. So that means that state school now got 5 times as many applicants. And so they got 30,000. They still only have a place for 3,000. And so their acceptance rate is now 10%. And so a school just went from 56% to 10%. 10% is, like some Ivy League schools are at 10%. Okay. Not this year, but in previous years. So the moral of the story is many schools are getting much more competitive. And I actually just kind of refined this PowerPoint to, I used to have 10 reach schools and 10 safety schools on this slide. And I took 3 reach schools off because I just feel that it's much more important in this uncertain climate for students to have more safety schools on their list. And that's why I also changed this slide to say your final list should have 3 reach, 5 target, and 4 safety. I used to have 3, 5, 3, but I do think it's even more important to have more safety schools when there's so much uncertainty out there. Who knows whether next year's numbers will go back to the 2020 numbers? Will they go back to the 2019 numbers? Or will they, stay at those competitive 2021 numbers? Nobody has a crystal ball, but when I advise my clients, I like to err on the side of caution so that they have more safety schools, so that they, have somewhere to go. Remember while you're whittling down your list, and this whittling down process, I should say, of course, takes place through college visits, right? And I recommend that you visit the safety schools and then the target schools. Everybody always wants to visit the reach schools, but the reach schools are getting even harder to get into. And sadly, the chances, if you're applying to a school like Stanford or Harvard, Harvard's acceptance rate was only a little bit over 3% this year. Even before this year, Stanford's last year was 4.5% acceptance rate. That means that, basically 96 kids out of 100 don't get in. So when you get your acceptances back, you'll generally only have about a month to make a decision and send in a deposit. It's much easier to send your kid, to reach into your pocket and send your kid to their reach school if they get in, and say, honey, go visit your reach school. I'm so proud of you. You got in, just to make sure that you like it. It's much easier to do that than if they get rejected from all of their reaches and then, some of their targets, and now they just only got accepted to their safety schools. So visit the safety schools first. Make sure they're places that you would be happy going. Again, important to take notes whenever you're doing this. And I recommend amending your list, reorganizing it if necessary, adding to it if necessary, so that your college list is finalized by the summer before your senior year. And that's because you really want that summer, I believe, to be spent on the college essay itself. And I should just mention, by the way, I do have talks coming up on a one-night talk in July on how to write a great college application essay that is free. It's at a library on Long Island. And then I'm also offering a low-cost course in July that is 4 nights. You can find all the information on my website under classes and workshops. And if you feel like your child is struggling to write that essay, signing up for a course like that gives them the structure that they might need to get started. So there's been a lot of talk about early action, early decision, that kind of thing. You should really, there is an advantage to applying early. So most of those deadlines are November 1st. So that comes up very quickly. So that's why, again, that summer should really be spent, hopefully, on writing that college essay. Studies have shown, Solingo's book shows that applying early is equivalent to scoring 100 additional points on your SAT. And the people who get the biggest bump from applying early are actually girls. They're only because now many more young women attend college than young men. Not so. It's crazy how in one generation, back when I went to Harvard in the early 90s, our class was, I believe, 55% male and 45% female. Now, that might have been a little bit biased because Harvard had always been traditionally a male-only school. But even nationally, that trend has completely flip-flopped in just a generation, which is really great that so many young women are getting college educations. However, it means that the college application process is more competitive for young women. So while girls are only slightly disadvantaged during the early rounds, one study found that Women are 16 percentage points less likely to be accepted than similarly qualified men during regular decision, which generally takes place in January. And this is from Salingo. So if you are a girl, you might want to think about applying early to get into the school of your dreams. So I realize I've been talking quite a bit. It's about 45 minutes now. So if you'd like to learn more, feel free to email me where I can send you Dr. P's top 10 tips to craft a college list in PDF format. And that also has all of the websites that I mentioned earlier where you can compare costs. If you like Crimson Coaching on Facebook, you'll also get news on upcoming talks on college planning. I have actually quite a few coming up in May, as well as a couple already planned for the summer and fall. And I also do some talks on adolescent education, study skills, that kind of thing. So, you can check out my website for that as well. And when you subscribe to Crimson Coaching on YouTube, you'll also get notified of when I record, when I post recordings of talks like this. And as I mentioned, this talk is being recorded. So if you felt like you missed anything, you can go to Crimson Coaching YouTube channel and check it out there as well. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. And I'd like to open this up to questions either via the chat or via voice to voice. So unmute yourself and let me know what you think. Any questions?
Hi, this is Dina. I've been following you for quite some time. My son Matthew is a junior, and he's been, studying on his own for the SAT. When it comes to the college essay, how do you know what topic to write about, and do you offer help with that?
I do. Yeah, as I mentioned, I actually have a class that so there's two things. I would say first, you can, again, also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I think it's 10 very short videos, like 5 minutes each, that I call something like College Essay Boot Camp or whatever. So I take kids through the process week by week. I realize that watching a video, though, is really tough for some kids. They might need more interaction. So for that, there's also small group class that I'm actually offering in July. I'll put this here. It's called College Essay Boot Camp. And if you just put my name in, at this website, it's the Larchmont Mamaroneck Center for Continuing Ed. And if you go to their website and put that in there, you can register for the course. It's very cost effective. I will say that, it's the rare student that finishes their essay through that class, because unfortunately I just can't spend enough time with each student, but you can certainly get a rough draft done. And what's really nice is it gives the students this sort of positive peer pressure and the structure from me on how to get started. So I would say that. And then of course, private coaching. That's kind of like my bread and butter. That's what I do quite a bit. So those are my three options for you. My short YouTube course videos, this course in person in July, well, through Zoom in July, and then private coaching. Sound good, Dina? Good. So Michelle asked two questions, two great questions. Any websites that can help to focus in on majors? And I'm guessing by that you mean more sort of like, based on what I'm interested in, this is what I should major in, Michelle? I'm not sure, but anyway, if that's the case, I would say I don't. But that's actually a great question, and I'm going to look into that and just see. My daughter is you sure on Amajar. I'm not sure what that means. But I definitely can look into that, and you can definitely help. Uh, you know, uh, if you all find anything, let me know and I'll share with people. And if I find anything, I'll let you know. And actually, a great place to put that might be in the comments on the YouTube video once I post this. Okay. Michelle also asked, the college essay prompts for my 11th grader comes in August. No, actually. So the Common App itself refreshes on August 1st, which means that you can start basically finding out what supplementals are, when the new supplementals that each individual college is offering. But right now, you can create a sort of uh, 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 a profile. Sorry, middle-aged moment. You can create a profile for your child, or your child really, hopefully, should do this themselves on Common App with all their biographical data, and that will roll over on August 1st. The essay prompts, however, have been out since February 1st or thereabouts. CommonApp.org always releases their prompts well in advance of August, because a lot of English teachers of juniors, have writing, those kind of writing exercises. I would say, you want to really be careful, though, about going with an essay that your child writes in, say, March of their junior year, because lots of living can take place during April, May, June, July, August, that may impact their wisdom and potentially turn into an even better essay. The way I always describe it is, I was pretty much the same between age 46 and 47. But between age 16 and age 17, I changed a lot, okay? And most high schoolers do too. And so there's not really, other than kind of entering in all the biographical data that's required for students, I don't really recommend starting the essay much sooner than July 1st. There's a question. What are your impressions of New York City-based private liberal arts oriented reach achieve safety schools? Any pointers on names that stand out in your mind? Any that are good for setting a student on the law track? So I mean, there are greats, like the Eugene Lang School, New School for Social Research is great. But again, in terms of what's reach for one student is a safety for another student. So I can't really, without sort of knowing and I can't get into counseling your own child in the course of this webinar. That's something that I definitely do privately, but that's really, you need to think about what your child is, where they're scoring on their ACT or SAT, and where that puts them vis-a-vis that particular school, like I described a few slides ago. Are there any quizzes to find out students' talents to guide you in choosing a major? Myers-Briggs. It's so interesting. I love the Myers-Briggs as a fun, and for those of you who don't know it, this is like one of the 20th century's most famous personality tests, and it gives you 4 letters that supposedly characterize your personality, supposedly I'm an ENFJ. But they they've actually been kind of discredited by the psychological community because you can take a Myers-Briggs or any personality test on a different day and get a completely different result. That said, I would say, really look at, in terms of finding a major, look at what your child has excelled in already, what your child currently likes, and go from there. I'm not a huge proponent of those kind of personality tests. But then there are, books, like What Color is Your Parachute, an oldie but goodie, that can help you find sort of like where your interests lie. But in terms of books, I actually don't know about books or websites that help kids pick majors. And I'm gonna look into that. So definitely feel free to follow up with me if you'd like to. And I'll also, once I post this on YouTube, this video, if I find anything, I'll post the books and websites that I find in the comments on YouTube. Okay. Any other questions? These have been great questions, because questions that stump me, always force me to learn. So I think they're great. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I just want to once again say thank you to everybody who showed up tonight for your great questions. Thank you to Laura Cohen at Tapan Public Library, and to the library itself for organizing and sponsoring this talk. And, a couple of you have been to several of my webinars now, and that really brings me a lot of joy. I feel like I almost know you. But I would be so grateful, since, you coming back again and again, you must find them useful. If you could go to Google and Google Crimson Coaching. I'm going to put this in the chat. Google Crimson Coaching LLC and write a review. That really helps other people find me and find out about me online, and it's just kind of a nice way to pay it forward, so that other families, when they're going through the same kind of journey that you're on right now, they might be able to find me in the future. So I would really, really appreciate that Google review. So thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I hope maybe to see you at another talk in the future. Have a great night.